Most of us get our ideas of what prison is like from TV or the movies. Watch the popular Netflix show Orange is the New Black and you'll get the impression that women's prisons are violent and scary places. We spent the day at the Dakota Women's Correctional and Rehabilitation Center in New England and found the reality to be somewhat different. Orange is the New Black is based on a book written by Piper Kerman, who was jailed in 2004 on money laundering and drug trafficking charges and served just over a year in federal prison. The popularity of both her memoir and the hit series on Netflix shows how fascinated people are by what goes on behind the barbed wire. But TV and reality are vastly different.
It's nothing like you would even imagine. I mean, it's just really not. It's a relaxed environment. It's not scary. We don't have a lot of violence.
When I say the word prison, this is probably what comes to mind. You don't expect to see this.
We're in a unique setting as an old Catholic school that was turned into a prison. So there's no banging bars. It's dorm settings.
The worst enemy here, say the inmates, is boredom.
I've taken every class here I can and taken advantage of all the programming they do have. And I repeated classes because I've been here for over 5 years.
The facility was designed to house 126 women. There are 131 here. They start out in this orientation unit with 10 to a room. They're here for 30 days, many of them coming off of drugs, before they're moved into the main population. There's no privacy, and it also tends to be lonely.
The biggest challenge being here is being away from family, the ones you love, because we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Not bad with lemon juice.
So prison becomes a microcosm of society.
If you look at the research, they tend to reestablish family dynamics while they're incarcerated.
But as in families, it's not always smooth sailing.
Or just stupid fights, people that know people from the streets and they did something wrong and they just want to pay them back. But I mean, other than that, it's just girl and girl drama.
For those who do stay out of it, there's work, study, and prayer, and all that can lead to a better future. The reincarceration rate here is under 30%. North Dakota's prisons are full, and drugs are the biggest motivator behind crime in our state. We'll look at that more closely tomorrow night.
Whether it's opiates or alcohol, drug abuse and addiction are robbing far too many people of their abilities to think clearly and make a positive contribution to society. We begin tonight with some messages of hope that treatment is a better option than long-term incarceration.
The Dakota Women's Correctional and Rehabilitation Center in New England, North Dakota has room for 126 inmates. It is over capacity. Many of the women doing time there were jailed on drug charges, which are rising sharply. New laws passed in the last session are designed to lower the numbers by focusing less money on incarceration and more on rehabilitation. But does prison rehab work? And that's the focus of tonight's report, Crime and Punishment Redefined. Nicole Cook works as a seamstress in prison industries.
It all, I guess, started out with drugs.
Because of something she did in October of 2016. Well, Bismarck police took a Mandan woman into custody after another woman said she tried to kidnap her grandchild.
That day that this happened, I guess ingested a lot, and I ended up doing something I never should have done. I don't recall it. I blacked out.
A series of setbacks, a bad relationship, losing all of her possessions in a fire, set her looking for relief through drugs. And while she has no memory of the events that sent her to prison, she makes no excuses.
Since I almost harmed somebody else, it really gets me.
She wants to get her own kids back and says she's doing everything she can to make that happen.
It's hard being away from your kids, your family, but you have to take time to work on yourself, and I guess it's probably for the better.
Nicole is also training as a welder, a job she can take with her when she leaves. But even more important, she says, is the rehabilitation.
It's become kind of the norm for judges to send people to prison for treatment. We're becoming treatment centers instead of prisons, so we see a lot of people with chemical dependency issues and they really need help.
James Murphy has been the chaplain at the prison for 13 years, and he's become a trusted friend for some of the inmates. He says successful treatment involves more than counseling. It involves classes, school, training, preparing for a new life. A big part of that for many is religious awakening.
Quite a few women come here and meet God while they're here and have a hard time finding him when they leave here.
Nicole says she's determined to find that new life and get her family back. She hopes to be out in March. Tomorrow night, a message from a woman who was paroled 2 months ago and who is now working to help others battle their addictions. Addiction to painkillers has increased at an alarming rate, with deaths from overdoses tripling in just 3 years. The rescue drug Narcan may save a life, but it doesn't end the dependency. Too often, people get the treatment they need only after they've seen a judge. Nothing about Carrie Lehman says inmate. Her eyes are bright, her smile infectious. She works hard, 50 hours a week at 2 Dickinson restaurants, and pitches in here at her new place, a transitional home called Hope's Landing. It's hard to believe that just 2 months ago she worked here in prison industries.
I was addicted to pain pills, opiates.
Carrie was incarcerated at the Dakota Women's Correctional Center in 2011 with a maximum sentence after her 3rd drug conviction of 20 years.
The day I got arrested in 2011, the night before, I had got on my knees and I begged for God to intervene somehow and help me. Next day I was in jail and I've been clean ever since.
She detoxed the hard way in a room like this one. That was tough, but getting over the emotional dependency was worse. She says it took her 2 years in prison before she saw a sober life as a better life.
The majority of them, they've been abused, and they've grown up in families that have been neglectful and a lot of chemical dependency issues, so it just becomes generational.
Warden Rachel Junton started out as a counselor here. She says therapy helps for those who choose it. Sometimes part of the answer is even simpler than that.
Hi, Frankie.
You have certain expectations when you come into a women's prison, but what you don't expect is Frankie's unconditional love.
Frankie showed up at the facility as a stray. It was raining, and he was outside just soaking wet, and he's been here ever since.
But even Frankie can't cure all hurts. For that, the women here say they depend on God, on rehab, and on their own will to live for a better day.
I honestly believe if you are using, you are either going to end up in prison, and if that doesn't save you, you will die.
Now that she's out, Carrie spends a lot of time talking to others, helping them to stop the cycle before it's too late. So what happens to a woman immediately after she's released often determines whether she ends up back in prison. Some women are trained in jobs such as welding and will leave with marketable skills. Lehman was released in July.